Good afternoon. Today at the Intelligence Forum's Who Are You podcast, we're very privileged to have Kevin Parkin. This forum, Intelligence Forum, celebrates business, science, and innovation. And today, Kevin Parkin will tick all three of those boxes for sure. And I'd also like to thank Christina Scheck, who behind the scenes has been responsible for engineering this. And without her, it would not happen. So thank you very much, Christina. Kevin, you were described, I'll say this to you because you first came to my attention in the daily newspapers when you were described as big hitter Parkin. And I thought, God, I've got to meet this man. And now here you are. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kevin Parkin.
It's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
So the first question I'm going to put to you is, would you share with us your professional journey to where you are today?
Okay. Quite a convoluted route, Harry. I started off looking at studying engineering at Huddersfield Polytechnic, as it was then. A very practical solution. My school had been a technical school, so I'd gone down the engineering route from the age of 13. And in fact, we had a foundry at school, which was quite unusual. And we were doing some complex engineering drawings and were operating machine tools at a very young age. So I had my appetite whet. My father was in engineering, so he was quite keen that I studied engineering. And as an extra to that, I decided I'd study marketing alongside it. So I did a diploma in marketing at Bradford University while I was studying engineering, much to my father's disgust, because he said I should be doing accountancy and looking at accountancy because all these friends who'd studied accountancy were very rich and had a great lifestyle. Left Huddersfield, and the first job I went for, the MD said to me, "Have you studied any accountancy?" I thought he was a friend of my father's. He then sent me away on a day release course for 3 years to study accountancy, and I qualified as an accountant. That was the best thing that ever happened to me because, as a qualified accountant with engineering qualifications and a postgraduate diploma in marketing, I was destined for general management fairly quickly, and it put me on an extremely fast route into general management. And by the age of 27, I'd become a general manager. And that just opened so many doors for me. I worked outside finance after that, getting involved with companies that were distressed or getting involved with companies that needed change management putting in place, and got the appetite for turnaround and going into companies that needed lots of input, particularly from a finance side or an operations side. I took on production roles and production director roles in manufacturing companies, particularly in the engineering sector. Got into the chemical industry. I worked on and off in France for 10 years, having two stints of 5 years commuting every week to France, to Paris, and I had a plant in the south of France near Avignon making nuclear power equipment. And then came back to Sheffield and looked at doing more turnaround work and was approached to do a turnaround at Davy Markham in Sheffield, very traditional 180-year-old engineering company, very famous for building the Channel Tunnel boring machine, building the Millennium Bridge in Newcastle, and lots of very heavy construction parts and engineered parts used in rolling mills. The business was in serious trouble. Managed to get it turned around. I had to take the whole board out, which was a shame, but we had to restructure the whole of the business. And because the unions and because the local council and everyone thought the business was going to close down, the only thing I thought of to convince them that we really meant the business to stay was to put an apprentice training scheme in. And we put 20 apprentices in, which was quite expensive. But that one decision cemented the union, cemented the council, cemented suppliers and customers, and the business turned very quickly. We did a management buyout, and in 21 months, under endless investment, we managed to get the business highly profitable. And after 21 months, Endless sold it and made 13 and a half times their investment in that time, which was quite good for them. And I made a few bob out of it as well, which gave me a real big appetite for doing turnarounds. I also was approaching retirement age and bought a motorhome. Went into France for 3 weeks with my wife, and after the first week, she said, "You better find something to do. I can't cope with you." So got back into running businesses and did a few turnaround jobs and did some investments in companies. Then all of a sudden, Richard Cook, who I'd known for many, many years, had been working for Castings Technology, part of the university. And the university were going to close down quite an impressive titanium casting facility, the only one in the UK and one of the fifth largest in the world. And they'd issued redundancy notices. Richard and I managed to get that decision overturned. And in 2021, we bought the business. We've turned it round and we're just about to invest £11 million in a brand new facility in Sheffield, casting titanium parts for the aerospace and defence industry. So that's where I am, Harry.
What an amazing journey! It's fantastic stuff. So, talking about, you mentioned investments. You've made a few investments. Do you feel that businesses have adequate funding sources or the choice of funding sources? How have you found that?
I think if you're of a size, the answer is definitely yes. But to borrow anything less than £10 million is a real problem. And the reason for that is the fee structure of due diligence of accountants and lawyers ruins many deals. Very often, the well, a medium-sized deal will incur 200 to £250,000 worth of fees, and that can ruin a deal structure. Sometimes, if you fees are up to 10% of the transaction, that's an expensive process. And whilst due diligence is very important, and having due diligence data rooms already in place can save you quite a lot of money, the part of the process where the whole of the management team are focused on due diligence is always a problem, because in smaller companies you don't have excess resources for doing this work, and often if they take the management team take their eye off the ball of money of the production and the sales and marketing, you can finish up with a business that's not quite as successful as you expected it to be. So due diligence is a big issue. In terms of the finance availability, yes, there is lots of finance out there. It's very selective, and there are some very greedy people looking for ownership of the business, for lending or buying equity for very large parts of the proportion of the business in equity, and wanting to run the business as well. You've also got to be very careful of the non-execs they put on board, because sometimes you can't work with some of the non-execs, particularly if they're American-based people who want numbers every hour of the day, and you're held accountable for very small deviations.
Thank you. And another question I'd like to ask you is manufacturing and engineering businesses. How do you see the role of local and central government, and also academia?
Okay, if we start off with local government, we see lots of input from local government. We need everyone to understand that manufacturing is a good GVA earner for companies. It's not just a short-term earner either. These are sustainable businesses. If invested properly, if you have the infrastructure in place, these are here for a long time. I think the policy of putting up warehouses locally, filling them with 0 hours contract people, and then putting robots in is not the way of looking at a sustainable infrastructure for the regions. And we see so many of these 0 hours contracts going up. We see so many of these screwdriver factories that are just assembly plants and don't have basic engineering of R&D linked to design, linked to new products, new product introduction. And I think that we've got to get back to the basics of saying we do make things. We've got some highly skilled people in engineering, and we need to foster their ambitions of becoming revolutionary or developing revolutionary ideas for the markets.
Thank you.
In terms of the government, one of the big things for the government is we need to be less London-centric. We need to be less service industry-centric. We still have an awful lot to offer internationally in terms of ideas, in terms of productivity improvements. We haven't invested in robots enough. We haven't invested in materials handling, as Germany and France have done. But the government haven't given us sufficient incentives to be able to buy some of this equipment.
Academia?
Academia is a big question. I know very little about academia. I know that I've become very frustrated with academia. I would love to be able to get professors working with MDs. We used to have a club in Sheffield called the MDs Club where that actually happened, where if you were producing something extraordinary on your shop floor, you'd bring the professor and bring a load of students down to have a look at it. Similarly, if you got a problem on the shop floor, you rang the professor and he put the problem to the students and came out with a solution. Not having oodles of paperwork and IP and who's responsible for the IP, it just worked. Now we've got a system where we don't talk to professors, we don't know professors, and they don't get involved. We really need to get to that position again. We also need to make sure that the courses are structured towards developing practical engineers. We don't need theoretical engineers. We don't need alloys that are produced under laboratory conditions. We need to be producing special metals and new alloys on the shop floor. So we need to have students working with us on sandwich courses or part-time courses or projects relating to engineering.
I mean, talking about that, are you finding you're getting the right material coming through from regarding apprenticeships and coming out of education? How do you see that?
The answer is definitely not. I set up a business along with others in Sheffield called Workwise. This was a business where we were bringing young people into manufacturing and having them work here, not go to work with your dad for a day. They were in the business for up to 2 weeks, working in every department and understanding what engineering was all about. There's been a lot of redundancies in engineering over the years, and it's got itself a bad name. However, if we can get young people interested in manufacturing, if we can get young people interested in a career in manufacturing, we can put them through a degree free of charge. We'll sponsor them, we'll give them loads of practical advice and have a degree at 23, 24 and a journey for life that is going to be profitable for them. If they go to university directly, very often they come out with a great degree in engineering, but very little practical experience. And we find it difficult to train some graduates for the first 3 or 4 years because they don't have any practical knowledge.
And then health and safety has, I believe, been crucial to your success and key to your success or part of your success. Could you elaborate on that?
Okay, there is no more important part of our business than health and safety. It becomes before cash, it comes before profit, it comes before sustainability, everything. It's the first item on my board agenda. It's the first thing that happens to every visitor to site. If they've been here 100 times, they still watch the video in reception. They still sign a document that they've read and understood the safety procedures that we have on the shop floor and in the offices. We tell them about the alarms, we tell them about the assembly points, and we tell them about some of the dangers that are on the shop floor if they don't wear proper protective clothing or take proper advice. For me, it is essential that we don't have accidents or we prevent accidents as much as possible, and we record near misses to prevent accidents. I walk the shop floor daily. I walk the shop floor weekly for 1 hour with the supervisor in a different department each week, and I don't tell them which department it is, and we have action plans from that. I also believe that it's really important that the whole of the board walk the shop floor too and spot health and safety issues, not just tell the supervisor about them, take a photograph, note them down, and make sure that those changes have taken place. Unfortunately, when I was at Davy Markham, I had a death on the shop floor, and this is the worst time of my career. I would never want anyone to go through that. I learned an awful lot about having procedures in place, and we got some quite substantial procedures in place. However, a pack of cards happens, and the whole card pack falls down and you finish up with a death, and it was a horrible experience. I would never want anyone that I know to go through that.
Thank you very much indeed. And the last question I'd like to ask you today is the infrastructure of Yorkshire. What would you like to see improved, and actually just generally in the UK? Do you have a view on that?
Very much so. In Sheffield particularly, we haven't got a high-speed rail link to London. We've been electrifying the line for 30 years. Nothing's happened. The line to Manchester is appalling. It can take up to an hour to get to Manchester with stops. They've done some small improvements, but not enough. And the road infrastructure to Manchester is equally as bad. We have to go over the Pennines to get there, so it's invariably closed. And if we go over the M62, there are very often closures on that. We need a better infrastructure to get to Manchester, to Leeds, to Birmingham, and to London. I came up from London last Saturday morning, and all the routes were closed. We had to take the diversions on the train. So we're not going to attract people. We need to reopen Doncaster Airport, the longest runway in the UK. It's just been neglected. I am sure that if some of these infrastructure projects were in the south of England, they would have been done 20 or 30 years ago. We are neglected in the north, and it's a real shame.
Well, look, it's been a great privilege to have you here today, Kevin Parkin, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.